Hello, Theo traders. Here's the nightly report for Thursday, April 14th. I'm looking at a daily chart of the ES futures. So this is the S&P 500 on a daily chart. Okay, and the price is coming up. So even though we've seen this nice little breakout to the upside today, things just stalled out. And this is not surprising because the price is just jammed up against this very, very extensive value area. Okay, so a value area is created when price spends an enormous amount of time trading there. So really what we're saying is, in this area, is that it was almost priced to perfection, right? So the value was agreed on between buyers and sellers over a great deal of time up in this area for a long period of time in 2015 and for a couple of months here in the end of 2015. And then as we got into 2016, things got to be an argument to the downside, right? But then we're right back up to this value area here. And so it's not surprising to see a little doji day as the price could not really get anywhere. So with this in mind, let me show you what I'd like to see from the S&P or in general the market at this point. Now, just because it's something that I'd like to see means there's zero chance of it actually happening, but this to me would make the most sense if it were to actually happen. Okay, I've gone out to a weekly chart now on the S&P, so you can see even more clearly now this area that's just been a range-bound nightmare for many traders over the course of the last year and a half or so. Okay, just bouncing around in this area, so there's no indication that we're going to see anything different once we get up here. So what I'd like to see from the S&P at this point is, now that we've gotten up to this balance area, I'd like to see something happen similar to what we saw after a similar move last October when we went screaming up here. Eventually we saw the price come down really hard in the space of a week. And I would love to see that same thing happen right now. I'd love to see this come down really hard in the space of a week, maybe even go down to one of these important fib levels like 38.2 or 50%, or even as far as 61.8. But I would say probably more useful for it to come down to the 38.2 retracement. So if I wanted to pull up this drawing, I would just pull down to Fibonacci retracements. Start off down here, draw this up to that point, and now I can see that that's going to be about a 1974 level, approximately, within a point or so here. So this would be a nice place for it to pull back down to, and I would expect to see, at that point, I would expect to see a higher low. So in other words, I do not expect to see it all come all the way down here to 1800 again. What I would expect to see is the price pull down to this important level and establish what's called a higher low. So right now it's gone from a lower low to a higher high, and I would expect this to come down from a higher high to a higher low. It's certainly a higher low than this low down here, right? So this is why we call it a higher low. And then if it is able to bounce from that level, or even if it has to go down to the 50% and bounce, okay, then from what happens here will set the tone, I believe, again for the rest of 2016. We could either see one of two things happen here. Obviously, maybe bounce up a little bit, fade down into a lower high, and roll over. What I think is more likely to happen is for it to actually keep heading higher right now. And the reason for that is not anything to do with anything that's technical. It's more the fact that central banks the world around are driving this search for yield that's out there. And the search for yield is going to be found in anything that can produce a return, even if it's a stock that has a dividend payment to it. And this is why we're seeing all of these boring old Dow 30 stocks really catch a huge bid right now because of the fact that they're being acquired solely for the purpose of paying a dividend. So whatever happens in this range here, from wherever we put a high in to wherever that next higher low is, this area, what happens inside of here, is going to set the tone for the rest of 2016. Now, I don't want to be too repetitive about this. I know I brought this up at least once or maybe twice or maybe even more than that over the last couple of weeks, but it's hard for me to overemphasize how important that this is going to be, because I think what's at stake is somewhere on the order of about 500 points of the S&P. So think about 500 points of the S&P, whether it's to the downside or to the upside, and what catching just a piece of that would do for your performance, your confidence, being able to ride something like that for as far as possible. And a lot of it will be kicked off based on what happens on whether we break higher or lower from this particular range here. So folks, don't forget to pay your taxes tomorrow. It's April 15th tomorrow, and it's April expiration. So that's it for tonight's report. Thanks for listening, guys. We'll see you soon.